Hi, my name is Chris Melnick, and I'm a realtor in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Today, I'm going to talk about buying land in Nova Scotia. This is a kind of big issue, especially for people in BC and Ontario who see how seemingly cheap it is. Now, the first thing to remember about buying land is that banks will not give you a normal mortgage to buy it. You usually have to either have a line of credit or have cash. Next, do you plan to build a house there? If the answer is no and you just want to buy it to ATV on or go for walks or camping or something like that, you don't really have to do as much work. If it seems nice, you can just buy it. But for most people who are watching this video, you're probably looking at building a home on semi-rural land. If that's the case, there's a number of things you have to think about. Now, when people ask me what I think of a piece of land, here's what I normally do. Before I ever step foot out of the office, I look up the address on Google and check with Google Satellite to see what's around. Is it a busy road? Is it a highway? Is it close to industrial facilities? What are the neighbors like? Sources of noise pollution or other sorts of pollution could be a quick no. I mean, why would you live in a rural setting and be around that? Then I'll double check the listing for size and zoning. If the lot's on municipal services and you don't need a well or septic system, it can be small, like 3,000 square feet. But if it needs to be on a well and septic system, you generally want at least an acre. Anything smaller than that can make things difficult to install a septic system and well, but not impossible. And being smaller can really compromise the privacy, which is often the reason you'd want to live in a rural setting to begin with. You just need to take this into consideration. But it's best to look for 1 acre or more. Be careful with narrow, long lots. These can have a large amount of acres, but you may end up being close to your neighbors on the sides, be paying for a long driveway, and be paying for a number of extra power poles from Nova Scotia Power to bring power into your house. Now, for zoning, you just need to make sure that it allows residential, like R1, R2, or a number of other zones that allow residential. Next, I'll look at the survey if one's provided. The survey is very useful. Aside from listing dimensions of the property, you can also get a rough idea of where you'd like to put a home. It can also show wetlands, high water marks, and setbacks from watercourses. These are basically protected wet areas. You cannot build a home, nor put a driveway or septic system in these areas. Sometimes this is a deal breaker in itself. I'll also check to see if the property has restrictive covenants. Restrictive covenants are basically rules imposed on that land. This is usually the case when it's part of a subdivision. These can be even over 50 years old. Sometimes they specify the minimum or maximum size of home, the type of home, the limitations of detached garages, the limitations of types of animals you can keep as pets, and even ban fences and clotheslines. Now, if they exist, these restrictive covenants need to be read and understood so that the home and lifestyle you plan to live fits within these rules. I'll also look at ExploreHRM. I'll put the link in the description. This is a great tool. You can see the property outlines, switch views to satellite, and even dig up a lot of information. Now, here's where you can also see the zoning of the property you're interested in, as well as the neighboring properties. If your neighbor is zoned for some type of commercial or industrial, that may be coming. ExploreHRM also allows you to look up the topography of the land. This gives you an idea if it's going to be flat or potentially on a cliff. Generally, the best thing to have in a lot is being mostly flat with a slight slope. This is for both water drainage and to make sure the septic field operates properly. Next, we can also dig into more of the listing. Some land already has a driveway and/or is cleared. Most aren't. Sometimes a soil assessment was done, which shows that a septic system can be installed, but most times it isn't. Another important thing to remember is that new land that has just been subdivided will have HST on top of the purchase price. Resale land doesn't have this. Now, this often isn't posted in the public version of the listing, but a realtor can find out. If everything checks out, we can view the property in person. Land condition varies, but sometimes it's swampy or full of thick bushes, so dress appropriately based on the listing pictures and weather. In person, you can get an idea where the home will be and the level of ambient noise, and how close the neighbors are. Also, pay attention to the road that it's on. It's fairly common for land to be on gravel private roads that may be in rough condition and known to break rims. Now, if it's private, yearly fees for clearing and upkeep can be around $500. If you like it, submit an offer, and if it gets accepted, you now have to satisfy yourself with a high level of confidence that you could put in a well, septic system, driveway, and the land itself is suitable for a home. That's the grade and condition of soil, etc. Now, the offer would be conditional on these things. Notice that I did not say 100% confidence. There is a risk involved in buying land unless you're willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars to find out. Now, you'll still end up spending money to have a high level of confidence, but not nearly as much. To be 100% sure that you can install a septic system, some people pay for a soil assessment, previously called a perk test or percolation test, where a backhoe is brought in to dig up a hole and make sure the soil drains properly for a septic system. This can be over $1,000. It can take a long time to get lined up. If the soil is frozen, they have to wait till it thaws. Some people just hire a very experienced septic installer to walk the lot to tell you what they think. Some of these guys have been doing this for over 40 years, and they have remarkable insight just with a walk. They can often tell you what type of system it would be and ballpark you even on a price. For a well, the only way to be 100% sure that you can put in a functional well is to actually drill the well. This isn't realistic for during the conditional period because wells cost over $15,000, at least for drilled wells. Normally, you look around the area to see if a neighbor has a well. If they do, you can have a reasonable level of confidence that you can install one too. Now, talking to neighbors can also be very useful, especially if they're the original owners and are familiar with the well installation. There's also an online well log. I'll leave the link for that too in the description. It shows the homes that have had wells installed and gives you information such as depth and flow rate. The deeper a well is, the more expensive it is. Now, the logs don't seem to be comprehensive, so you may not be able to look up the immediate neighbors, but even just getting information on a well on that street can be handy. Thirdly, a driveway permit needs to be issued to make sure you're allowed to make an access point from the street onto the property. Ignore this if it already has a driveway. Now, this is through the city and takes a couple of weeks. As a rule of thumb, if your neighbor has a driveway on the lot and it's like yours, you probably won't have an issue. The city's usually concerned with having a driveway around a blind corner. Now, finally, the feasibility behind the home itself. If you're already in talks with a builder, you would have them on site to tell you what they think. Builders are often very experienced. They can estimate any fill needed and can give you some pretty good insight into whether or not they see any issues. Now, if you don't have a builder in mind right now, you could get one to come out and pay them a consulting fee to tell you what they think. Now, these things can take some time, so we would usually have 3 to 4 weeks for a conditional period. Even though there is risk involved, homes are built like this all the time, and innovative solutions for water and septic systems are always options. Now, I hope you got some value from this, and feel free to contact me. My information will be in the description. Goodbye.